I've got to be honest, even though there have been many freedoms that have been eroded since the dawn of our country, I am very optimistic by what I see as people become more interested in learning about the Constitution, more interested in learning about the founding of our country, and more interested in becoming involved and doing something to help protect and preserve both of those things and reclaim what we've lost. But I am afraid that in our attempt to return to those constitutional principles, to regain freedom and liberty, that we forget a really important piece of that puzzle, a very important ingredient in that recipe. And we need look no further than the American Revolution and the French Revolution to see why I might be a little bit worried about that. So very briefly, the American Revolution was fought by colonists who for over 150 years had been in the Americas, had been experimenting with self-government, had a lot of experience actually governing themselves, and had done all of this under a very Christian worldview where they were trying to live by those values. When the American dream was born, people could come from nothing in Europe and come here and make something of themselves. On the flip side, over in France, after America won its independence, the common people decided they wanted the same thing for themselves. And so eventually they stormed the Bastille. This is an event that's still celebrated by the French on July 14th. They decapitated the jailers and paraded them around through the streets in celebration of the freedoms that they were reclaiming. They set themselves up as a republic and drove out and eventually killed just droves of the nobility. And at the same time, as they're killing the nobility and driving them out of the country, they're doing the same with the clergy, with the Catholic Church, who was a part of the ruling class that had oppressed them during this time that America is experimenting with freedom. The French are just being oppressed by both the nobility and by the clergy. So they all had to go. And this is where we get just this horrific period of time where the streets are literally running with blood in France. Now, what is the main difference between these two revolutions? The main difference is, I guess there's two main differences. One is that America had some time to experiment with freedom and to learn how to govern themselves. They also had God as part of the equation. They had principles like don't just not kill, but try not to get angry with your brother. So when you have people that want to drag some of the British sympathizers out into the street, people like Alexander Hamilton step in and remind them of these Christian principles and how they need to not just descend and resort to violence like that. So this is why I wanted to bring up these two examples. I am excited by the interest in freedom and liberty that we've been seeing in our country recently. We've just got to be very careful to make sure that in our attempt to restore freedom and restore liberty, that we don't neglect to include the person who was the author of that liberty in the first place, and that's God. He has absolutely got to be at the center of everything we do right now to reclaim freedom, and we've got to make sure that we are doing it in His way. Otherwise, history gives us a pretty dire warning of what we can expect if we don't.